G'day guys, today I'm going to be changing the engine mounts on this 2009 3.2 Pajero. The reason that I know it needs engine mounts is that at idle there's quite a lot of vibrations when I'm in drive, so basically when the torque converter is a bit loaded up because it's an auto. And so when I'm sitting idling it'll get really vibraty sometimes, but not all the time because it kind of depends where the engines kind of come to rest kind of thing. And then I'll put it into neutral and the vibrations will lessen like quite a lot. So I'm going to do like kind of a bit of a before and after and show you through how I change them. But let's hope that I'll just turn it on now and see if the GoPro can pick up these vibrations. Okay, so that's not too bad yet. Oh, it's because I'm not in gear. So I'm hoping that can pick that up because that is quite. So that's in drive with foot on the brake, so it's kind of loaded up, ready to go. So that's the most load the engine will be on at idle kind of thing. But then if you listen, hopefully this picks this up. I'll put it into neutral and so like it stops quite a lot. Reverse is okay. Park is obviously fine because it's like neutral, but then back into drive and it's vibrating. Now it does sometimes get a bit better as it warms up a bit because like diesel engines are quite knocky when they're cold anyway, but this has gotten a lot worse. You know, I think the trip to the Cape didn't help his engine mounts. I was already suspect of them, and then when I went to Glasshouse the other weekend, I think that was the last straw for them. Alright, so I thought I'd just show you the engine mounts. So this is, I got this from Repco, it's CalPro, that's the part number. They're the same left and right, so you just get two of these. They were $70. You know, I don't know if how great they are or how much an OE one costs. I know it costs more, but I don't know how much better quality you're getting kind of thing. So this is what you get. So you have the engine mount itself, and you have the metal plate that goes on top of it, like that. So that's what you have. Yeah, so that's what you get. $70, pretty cheap. Hopefully it's going to fix my vibration issue. Some people have said that on some of the forums I read, they said they cut this down because the nut sits like here, right? And like it's quite a long stud and you have to lift the engine up this far to get it off the mount, which is a fair way with, you know, the gearbox and everything else still connected. So some people will actually cut this in half kind of thing to make it easy to get out so you don't have to lift it up as high. I think there's a better way to do it from what I've seen, but you know, I might be wrong. It might take me a long time to do this. So we'll see how we go. Okay, so down there is the engine mount for the passenger side. So I'm going to try and take the two bolts off the block and then the two bolts off like that's one down there and there's one on the other side, down in there somewhere. So there's two bolts that hold it to the chassis and there's one bolt in the middle that holds the two together. So what a lot of people do is they just take that middle one off and then these two ones on the chassis off because that's the bit you're actually changing. The other bit stays on the engine normally. But I think it'd be easier to just take the whole thing off together, pull it apart in the middle, so that center bolt in there, wherever it is, and then put them together outside the car, then put it back in. Obviously all with the engine supported. So we're going to try that. If that doesn't work, we might have to cut down that bolt because you can see what I was saying before about how much thread sticks out the top of it. Okay, so we're under the car here and this is where you would jack the engine up from. So this is where I jacked it up from, just with a thin piece of wood straight up here. This is the passenger side. There's one on the driver's side as well, which I'll show in a second. So that's just the block, that's the bell housing, if we can see that. Yes, that's the bell housing, that's the end of the block. It's a nice solid place to jack up from. Over on this side, up in there is the same thing as the other side, on the driver's side. And yeah, that's where you jack up from to do the driver's side mount. Alright, so we just got this engine mount out, and as you can see, it is completely just destroyed. Like, it's completely ripped in half. So these are a hydraulic bush, they have oil inside them. As I thought, it's obviously torn, the oil's come out of it, and then it's just kept rotating until it's ripped completely in half. So this sits in the car. So this is actually the bracket off the engine. So that sits on the engine like that, and then this one sits on an angle in there. So that sits in there like that. So when we were pulling it apart, we could only get it so that there's still about this much thread kind of sticking out when we were pulling it apart. And that was with the engine touching the firewall. So I don't know how you're meant to get it out, but once it was to that point, because this was torn in half, I was able to pull the back end out and then pull the top end out. If the bush was intact, I don't know how it would have gotten out. So I was trying to take it out with this attached to it, because I had read that people have issues with this and they quite often cut down the stud and whatever, but that's hard in itself. So I was able to get 3 of the 4 bolts that hold this in. Well, it was actually 5 bolts that hold this in. So there's this one up in this corner, and then there's one that sandwiches it in, like right next to it, like about here. So I had to undo these, and then once that was out, I could get a ratchet onto these 2, and then you kind of just wiggle this one out. So the plan is now to put the new engine mount, so this is the new one. I'm thinking I'll just attach it and then try and put it in one, so I don't have to deal with, you know, that coming off and all that kind of stuff. I don't know how I'm going to go reattaching these 2, because I couldn't actually get to them with the engine mount in, but might have to get creative with that. But yeah, so the only difference between these 2, which I'm going to look at, is that, so this one, it's not bonded, this aftermarket one, this top piece is not bonded to this at all, whereas it kind of looks like this one, maybe, this OE one. Or it might just be stuck in there from, you know, being broken and just getting pounded in there for however long, you know, because this has done the whole cape probably like this. Yeah, so we'll try and throw this one in, and then we'll do the turbo side, which is going to be a lot harder. So we just got this top piece out of here, just tapped it down. So it was just stuck in there. So this is one piece. So the replacement one that we've got is the same as this design. Well, it's at least not bonded to it, which I was worried about. So also I'm thinking I might use this OE top bracket instead of this one, because they're the same thickness, but this one has like this bracing and stuff welded in here. I assume they did that for a reason. Like, they're the same thickness, so normally if you're going to delete this bracing and whatever, you'd make it a bit thicker material, but I think that should fit, because apart from that, it's the same. If it doesn't fit, I'll just use this one. Like, it's not the end of the world, but since I've got this one, I might use this one. Yeah, so when you're putting the engine mount in, you got to make sure that these little locator pins sit in the holes. So you got to make sure they're lined up properly, and then there's also tabs on this. I'm not sure how much these matter, but just make sure that they're orientated the correct way, so that the tab goes into that hole kind of thing. I think it's just to help locate it. I don't think it's the end of the world if they're not there, but yeah, just, it's already hard enough, so might as well make sure you get that right before you put it in the car. Alright, so I'm going to actually cut part of this thread off, because I don't think there's any way to get the whole assembly in there. So I'm going to cut it about there-ish, about 5 threads down, I think. And yeah, hopefully I can put it in how it's meant to go in then. So we'll see how that goes. Alright, so I've just gotten back from changing these engine mounts. And yeah, the difference is night and day. So the car is currently running. That's it in drive. I still don't know if like can really hear this, but I'll try and do like a side-by-side before and after. So yeah, basically it's night and day, like, and it makes sense. Those engine mounts were completely torn in half. Like, I don't know how it wasn't making even more noise than it was, and it was making a fair bit of noise. So it looks like the driver's side one looks like it had been broken for quite a while longer, because there was no oil in it at all. It was completely dry, so that's possibly, I possibly did the cape with that one like that, and it got washed out in all the water crossings kind of thing. So it turned out I didn't do too much filming of removing, because you just can't see anything in there. Like, so the driver's side one, the best way to do it is from underneath. So you get underneath it and you kind of come up past the dump pipe, and a ratchet 14mm spanner is about all you actually need if your engine mounts are ripped in half. So since the engine mounts are ripped in half, I was able to pull the bottom part out and then the top part. If the engine mounts aren't completely torn in half, you'd have to get a bit creative, because originally I didn't think they were completely torn in half, and so I was trying to remove the whole bracket off the engine, and that wasn't going well. I don't think I could actually do it on the other side, let alone the side with the turbo, which is much harder. So yeah, luckily for me, both of mine were completely torn in half, so I could pull them out, and then to put the new ones in, I just cut like a bit off each of the stud, so it could just like go in and then drop it down onto it. Because you just can't pick the engine up. There's probably a way to drop the engine, like maybe if you drop the transmission cross member to like let the whole engine kind of twist more, but it was kind of touching the firewall, and yeah, like you don't want to move things too far with everything all connected. So the second one took me only an hour to do, pulling it out, putting the new one in, cutting it, everything. It took me an hour to do. The first one took me 4, maybe 5 hours, because I was trying to pull that bracket off, and I was getting quite creative with extensions and knuckles and yeah, ways to get to the bolts, because it was just, yeah, it was borderline impossible. I also tried putting the whole thing together. So when I did the passenger side one, I took the bracket off the engine and the chassis bracket and put them together, and then tried to put them in as one, but it was too big. I couldn't do it. I messed around with that for a bit, and then even if I did manage to do it, I didn't know how I was going to be able to do up the bolts for the engine mount, the engine side of it, because I could only undo them with the engine mount out. So that's when I decided just to cut them and cut my losses, kind of thing. And you're not going to have any dramas with cutting it. I don't know, I just didn't want to cut it. Yeah, tips for if you are cutting it: put the nut onto it, get the nut onto it, and then mark where you're going to cut it. Grind the little edge so it has a bit of a chamfer on the edge of the bolt, and then wind your nut off. The reason that is because it'll kind of clean up any threads that you may have messed up if you wind the nut off. Whereas trying to start that back on potentially messed up threads is just potential cross-threading. I used an engine crane just because I had one, but I also used a jack at one point because I thought that might help get it higher, but it didn't change. It made no difference whether I was using the engine crane or the jack with a piece of wood. But yeah, very, very happy with how it drives now. I don't have to brace myself and put it into neutral every time I come to a stop at an idle. I think I explained this earlier, but the symptoms are obviously just hectic vibrations in drive, and then you put it in neutral and it gets a lot better, and then you put it back in drive and it's basically knocking. Yeah, I found that I didn't have a whole lot of like engine movement. That's what I was expecting. A bad engine mount would be like the whole engine would just like every time you rev it kind of thing, and engines do move a bit.
when you rev it, but it wasn't. I didn't think it was excessive, so I didn't think my engine mounts were bad. It wasn't until I got on the forums and people were talking about vibration and that engine mounts are quite common to do on these cars, that I realised it probably is the engine mounts. So yeah, happy I changed them. They're cheap, you know, $70. We'll see how these Calpro ones hold up, you know, $140. I might have a look at the trans mount, just to see, since that one's probably been doing a bit of work since those two have been completely destroyed. But yeah, that's Pajero engine mounts for you.